Hey, I'm Megan. I took part in Peachtober 2025 and miserably failed at it. So, I've been gone for a little while, and if you've been wondering where I've been, it's because I've been off taking part in an art challenge called Peachtober, and as you may have gathered, failing at completing it. So, Peachtober, if you don't already know, is an art challenge that takes place every October, and it's kind of an alternative to Inktober. Similarly, it's a list of 31 prompts that you can sort of use as a springboard to create whatever you want from. Whereas with Inktober, you're pretty much limited to using ink. With Peachtober, you can use any medium you like, plus the words are a little bit more cutesy leaning rather than spooky, so that leaves it a bit more open. It's run by an illustrator who goes by Fairy Little Peach, hence Peachtober, and lots of illustrators as well as other artists take part, so I was eager to take part as well. So, why do I say miserably failed at Peachtober? Well, because out of 31 chances to make and post a piece of art every day of October, I only managed 6. So not great. So journey with me, why don't you, to find out just how I managed to fail so spectacularly at this challenge. It all started in August. Yes, August. Not October, not even September, but all the way back in August. It was safe to say that I was on the ball this year. Now, I say this year because this is not actually my first attempt at Peachtober. I actually tried to take part last year as well and made the grand total of 1 illustration. Yes, 1. Granted, I was in the middle of a massive undertaking. I was building up my portfolio from the ground up, but still, 1, really? So this year I was on it. I'd finished my portfolio and I was ready come August. If you're curious about last year, here's what I created. So this was for the prompt Daisy, day 1, and immediately when I heard Daisy, I thought 60s flower power, and I was imagining this really graphic Daisy shape, kind of like what might adorn the mod fashions of the time. And then my mind somewhat jumped to a furniture design from the 70s, which is this Drexel +1 set. I mean, just look at this, a gorgeous lemon, lime green and pink furniture set with typography swirling across. I took this psychedelic lettering and I put it onto my graphic daisy shape. Every other petal, I said, loves me not, like that game that you'd play as a kid. And I really like the outcome, like how fun and how graphic it is, but to be honest, the finish isn't great. It was definitely rushed, and so this image ended up being my first and last attempt at Peachtober, last year at least. So that was a harsh reality check that I wouldn't be able to do Peachtober and my portfolio at the same time last year. So this year I was ready. I had my portfolio finished and I was free to do any work I liked. So come August, I was ready. Picture this, a lovely sunny day in my studio, late August, and for once I was in silence. No music, no podcast, no video in the background, and I had this moment of clarity. I was thinking about the upcoming Peachtober challenge and I decided that I needed a plan of action. You see, I love Peachtober in so many ways. I love the idea of it. The community element, the fact that it gets you out of your head, and just the novelty of it all is great. But one thing that I was a little nervous about was how to stand out in a challenge like that. In previous years, when I was lurking on the Peachtober hashtags instead of actually doing it, I noticed that quite a lot of illustrators create quite literal interpretations of the words. So if the prompt was, let's say, worm, they'd quite literally just draw a worm, but in their style. And it really worked for them because they had this distinct, gorgeous way of drawing. And so even if they were just literally drawing the word, it'd still stand out from the rest of the illustrators. But you see, I don't think I really have that, at least not yet. I'm working towards having a style, but at the moment, I just don't think it's unmistakably me yet. And so I was thinking, you know, if not a way of drawing, what does make my art stand out? And then it came to me. I think something that crops up in a lot of my artwork is the theminess of it all. I think it can get quite kitschy the way that I take like a common concept such as music or sports and I really push it to its limits. It gets a bit out there, you know, and I think that's what makes me stand out. So instead of using the prompts as instructions, I decided to use them as themes. Now, that begs the question, a theme for what? Not another living room, please. Anything but another living room. I've done so many at this point. But there's something to be said, I must say, for designing a space. I really love it. There's so many individual elements to design and then bringing it all together cohesively, it can be really satisfying. So I wondered, how about a whole bunch of different environments, not just interior spaces like houses? And that's when I came to making this list. So I started simple, cafes, restaurants, and then I moved on to the more adventurous, theme parks, ballrooms, and then onto the more random, dentist offices and petrol stations even. Looking back, I think this could make for quite the nifty resource, so feel free to nab any ideas if you'd like. It's quite the extensive list. Soon September arrived and I was armed with a plan and a list. And then the real list I'd been waiting for arrived. And what a beauty it was. Take a look at this. The blue skies, the primary colours, the grid paper and the outdoorsy doodles. What a joy it was. And just the vibe I was going for. It turns out that Sean, the creator of the challenge, was going for a walk in the woods vibe, both for her illustrations and the words that she set for us all. So that really worked out well for me, considering all these wacky environments I was planning. I think they'd make for a pretty great adventure, don't you? And the outdoorsy doodles on the list reminded me of another layer of challenge that I wanted to add to the already challenging challenge. And that was that I wanted to make sure that I drew plenty of outdoor scenes. Up until now, somehow I'd managed to avoid it. It sounds silly maybe, but I've been intimidated to draw outdoor perspective. I'm pretty comfortable now in indoor perspective, seeing it essentially as a big cardboard box with a bunch of smaller cardboard boxes inside. But outdoors, with all the wiggly lines and random shapes, it would be tough. But still, I set my course on the month and I got started. Looking at the words, for the most part I was super excited, but some of them were a little worrying. 15. Aquarium in itself is an environment. How was that gonna work? But I just thought, instead of panicking, breathe, take a sec. It's only September, there's no need to go in order. I can just start with any prompt that calls my name. And the one that called my name was strawberry. Now, you may or may not have noticed, but I have quite the penchant for fruits, and especially decorating with them. Take, for instance, this fruity little number. What's inside it, you ask? Why, it's even more fruit, this time tiny little apples. There's quite a few. And I've got plenty more examples like this. And that's just a glimpse into my mind. And here's another, the first sketchbook page for Strawberry. The environment I picked for this was a theme park. They're a recent obsession of mine, which is weird because I haven't even been to one lately. I guess they have been cropping up a lot in what I've been watching though. I've been making my way through a lot of animated shows, and one in particular, Dead End Paranormal Park, is about some kids working and practically living, to be honest, in a theme park. Well, they're supposed to be of working age, but look at this and tell me that this isn't a 12-year-old child that's illegally working in a theme park. But yeah, I enjoyed it, especially as it carried on and became more subtle with its storytelling. The other show on my mind was the theme park adventure spin-off of Rilakkuma and Kaoru. Now I must say, as a fan of the original show, I was not a fan of this. It really lacked the warmth and character of the first series. But the aesthetic was really fun to look at, and I'll admit that even I got swept up with all the fun of the fair. Theme parks, they just get me, honestly. They're an environment that at their very heart are themed. Think about a ride. It always has a concept, a mini theme within a theme. It's called a theme park. Come on now. So, we started with Strawberry Land. This is me just hashing it out and practicing some things I haven't drawn before, like a helter-skelter and a roller coaster. And here's a thumbnail. The gate itself is a strawberry, and leading up to it we have strawberry fields on either side. Bit of a Beatles reference there, of course. I thought the carriages of the roller coaster could be strawberries, so then it starts to be a strawberry within a strawberry, and I just nearly exploded with all the cuteness. I took the thumbnail over to this large sketchbook and started the line art stage. I tried not to overdo it with the layout. I have a tendency to draw everything individually, but I just end up making a massive job for myself where I have to digitally cut out every single layer before combining them. So I stuck with two, a background and a foreground. This is also how I hacked my fear of outdoor perspective, as I realised that you don't have to draw everything on one plane. I then started on the final. I knew the gate would be red, so I chose green and pink for the rest. They're complementary colours and just super cute. This helter-skelter is pastel though, and not gonna lie, I'm super proud of it. It's like an upside down ice cream cone, and get this, it's called Sunday Scaries. Then I did these, the gate and this little snack stand too. I know I initially said I only wanted two elements, but when I put them together digitally I noticed a massive gap at the side. Plus, I wanted to flesh out the world a little. I took the opportunity to do a cute food stand, and this is kind of a culmination of my love for all things kawaii lately, especially the new My Melody and Kuromi show, which again is that stop motion fibre technique that I've been loving. It's set around a baking competition, so has a lot of pastel and cute themed desserts. This could fit in nicely into that universe, I reckon. So here's the final edited together illustration. I mostly finished this in September, only adding finishing details just before posting. It felt good having a finished illustration under my belt, so I went back to the prompt list with optimism. I headed now for the first word on the list, acorn. I immediately thought of an acorn cafe. Lately I've been obsessed with the idea of themed cafes. Perhaps because over the summer I was binge watching a lot of baking videos. There were two YouTubers in particular I was loving. One was Dore Imani, who made some mammoth length videos of her baking her way through an entire manga series called Kitchen Princess. All the recipes in the books were often tied to the story, which seemed so unique to me. And two was Michelle Meng, who did more figurative bakes. From eating every Pokemon to cooking every recipe from Animal Crossing, it was strangely captivating to watch. Speaking of Animal Crossing, this was heavily inspired by my so-called Ochre Cafe that I made on the Animal Crossing New Horizons DLC. You don't even want to know how many hours I've spent on that game, but it's all good practice for this very prompt. As you'll see, it had this warm, inviting autumnal feel that I wanted to bring into my drawing. Some elements are directly pulled from it, like using a street lamp indoors and an ivy-covered wall. But for the most part, it's just subtle nods. Like the train chugging around the edges of the room, which is inspired by this adorable miniature train set from the game. When I discovered you could customise it for all 4 seasons, I got a little giddy. I love anything seasonal. I think embracing the current season is just a lovely little way of bringing in everyday joy. It's the same way I feel about baking. Sure, you've got to eat, but you can choose to go just a little extra by baking something sprinkled with a touch of magic. Acorn Cafe does just that. October 1st, I knew what the people wanted. Bam! Autumn! Once I'd finished the thumbnail, I was on an autumnal high, but that was quickly replaced with the thought that it wasn't quite acorn enough. Hence, this acorn soup doodle. So, I figured, you come to the cafe for the vibes, but you stay for the acorn-themed menu. Acorn soup being top of the list, since acorn dishes seem a bit limited, but I also designed some acorn-shaped iced biscuits, just to be on the safe side. Moving on to the line art now. In terms of detail, I really took a step up here from the strawberry. These leaves, whilst a whimsical idea, didn't feel so whimsical when I was tracing each and every one over to the final illustration, I can tell ya. My main issue these days seems to be that tracing stage that takes half a day, so you can see how time kept racking up on me. You may spot even more acorn details, in particular this adorable tea set of an acorn teapot and 2 acorn teacups. This is almost directly taken from my childhood of playing the Tinkerbell DS game. This teapot in particular, I had to repair time and time again, to the point where I would get bored of it. Fairies would appear in the little bubble saying, "Can you repair this, Tink?" And I would say, "You can repair it yourself. This is the 10th teapot I have fixed this week, and I am bored." But because of that, I think it's drilled in my mind and has somehow popped up here. There's also an acorn in the frame here. These oak leaves outside the window carry on the theme, but are also a nod to my past self, who was torn between designing a cafe or a tree house for this prompt. I like to think the view leaves it up to the imagination. This cafe could be atop the tree branches of an oak tree, though personally I'd not be in a hurry to jump up and down in there. And here's a little centrepiece I designed with the table numbers. I wanted to add more decor, as well as add more context clues that we were in a cafe, so putting a decorative table number neatly sorted that out. Plus, I'm just a tad obsessed with the idea of owning a miniature village, just like they do in Beetlejuice. So this styrofoam shrubbery is my take on that. And here's the final piece. I'm so happy with how immersive it turned out. It feels like POV, you're in the cutest cafe in town. The leaves are turning, you hear jazz tinkling over the radio, and you're just about to sit down to the coziest soup whilst the scent of coffee fills the air. I think it's down to how massive I made this table. It's like you've been invited to sit down at it. I'm glad I didn't agonise too much about how realistic the perspective is for this one. It makes you feel like you're experiencing the whole cafe at once. I'm glad to see how all the colours turned out too. I was worried it would be too much brown because of all the wood and end up like a dingy basement. Not what you want out of a chic cafe. But it all came together, and in part I think it's because of this Battenberg-esque flooring that mixed up the tones. Plus I added plenty of pops of colour. The ivy is a much needed rest from all that wood, and these vivid autumn tones. They're picked out in the picture frames too, which helps bring it all together. I love the scene itself, but I wish I'd gotten to adding characters. If I had the time, I was torn between human and animal characters. My tendency is always human ones, since I need the practice, that's for sure. And besides, I like designing outfits for them. But I was leaning more towards animals for this one, since I know people love to see cute creatures doing normal things. I personally love Odd Rabbits and Alice Williams, whose bunnies and cats always really light up my Instagram feed. So I do wonder how it would have turned out. Once day one was done and dusted, I landed on Slug for the next prompt. I was aiming at completing half the prompts, so decided to do a day, skip a day. With this prompt, I knew I was going to do an outdoor scene like I'd promised myself. But not just any old outdoor scene. I wanted all the environments to be a bit over the top. And that's kind of easy with interiors, because if you think about it, you can achieve any design you want to with just a lick of paint and a few questionable ornaments. But outdoors, you can't really do that. Or can you? It dawned on me. Ornamental gardens. They're the closest equivalent to interior design that you can get outdoors, since they're so tightly controlled. That's when I realised a golden opportunity. Giant garden-devouring slugs. They'd be a great contrast. Someone spent hours pruning their borders, trimming their hedges, planting bulbs exactly 2 inches apart. And then in comes giant killer slugs from outer space. Well, not exactly. Perhaps they just got so huge nibbling on this luxury feast of a garden. Who knows? Let's take a look at the line art. At the risk of sounding big-headed, I kept coming back time and time again to look at this. Like, wow, maybe I do have some talent after all. This page was one of those occasions where I thought, This is some proof that I'm not just kidding myself when it comes to art. And sure, it took a lot of time and a lot of tears, but hey, we got there in the end. In terms of the layout, it's pretty similar to the others, very central and divided mostly into the foreground and the background, which came in handy here since I was having a real hard time imagining the whole garden behind the archway. For some reason, if there's a big object blocking my view, I seem to lack the object permanence to imagine whatever's behind it, like I'm a big baby artist or something. So it helped entirely drawing this section first. The water on the fountain proved challenging. Hopefully it didn't end up looking too much like a mustache of slime coming out of it. And the trees was something I was weirdly nervous for. Striking that balance between resemblance and realism. It's hard not to get cartoony when drawing trees or leaves. You need a somewhat random movement in your line making, and to do that you've got to stay loose, otherwise you can get too rigid and fall into a rhythm of making the same line over and over. I added a couple of extra details in, since I figured the garden was too empty. It wouldn't make a very nutritious dinner for the slugs. I want to transition now to a speed painting segment, the first I've attempted. I've been wanting to do one for a while, but I pause a lot in my process, so it'd be a nightmare to edit. I kind of worked around that by getting the line art done first, so you'll just see my painting stage. Hopefully that's enjoyable enough. Since this is a time-lapse, I might as well take the opportunity to talk about time. You may notice throughout this video that the lighting shifts somewhat dramatically from day to dusk all the way through to night. My hope is that you'll just think, wow, what a dedicated artist, staying up till dawn for her craft, and not focus too much on the shoddy footage. The lighting should give you some hint as to my state anyway. So, Acorn was completed day of, and since then I'd been working day and night to get Slug finished in time for the 3rd. Well, spoiler alert, but this was taken in the wee hours of the 3rd, so it wasn't exactly going to plan. I ended up uploading it first thing on the 4th. I figured, you see, that the creator of the challenge is Australian, so technically I was on time. That being said, this had quite the domino effect for me. Once I'd slightly pushed the timings for this, it just got worse and worse. I'm trying to romanticise the whole all-nighter thing, but it was an intense night for me. Sure, I'd got in the groove, settled in for many hours of painting, but to be honest, if I didn't have podcasts on, I'd probably plonk my head on the desk and bang it a few times for good measure. But what kept me going was binge listening to the Creative Pep Talk podcast. I've been a big fan for a while, but I think this night really solidified it. It's ran by this guy, Andy J. Pizza, who's an illustrator too, and it's kind of what it says on the tin, a pep talk for creatives, but so much more too. What I really like about it is that it's long form, yet it has a really clear structure. I wasn't into podcasts for a while because it's often a whole load of waffling and you just scrounge out of it whatever you can manage. But with this, sure, there's a good measure of silliness, but there's also really defined points, which you make sure you remember through the call to adventure, a fun challenge that kind of sums up the episode. I like that it's not just about art making either, it's kind of more about life. He's always bringing up psychology and mental health to help you be productive even when it's hard. And trust me, I needed that. It helped just being surrounded by artists' voices as well. One of the lovely things about Peachtober is the social aspect, cheering people on. I loved leaving comments at the start, but as I started lagging behind, I didn't have time for it and I started feeling a bit isolated. So hearing other illustrators like Andy or even Furry Little Peach helped with that. Something else that helped, perhaps too much, was that at some point in the evening I accidentally had 4 shots of espresso at once. Yes, 4. We've got this new coffee grinder, right, and it's great. We're feeling real fancy using the beans. But what irks me is that it automatically assumes you're making coffee for a small platoon, and so when using it for the first time that very day, I pressed the button expecting a shot, or maybe 2, but it just kept going, flowing over the portafilter onto the counter. Finally, I switched it off, but it was too late. I swiped off the top till it just filled the filter, pressed it and went ahead. I felt so alive. I wasn't getting tired, I wasn't getting hungry, I was just painting. Turns out the coffee was ground way too fine, and so what would usually be 2 shots worth was 4. No wonder I was questioning why this was the most productive I'd been in years. No wonder. So from here I went back to the prompt list. I was a day behind and technically the next prompt should have been poppy, but I just couldn't derive enough out of it. I feel like with some of the other prompts, like for example acorn, I used it more of a starting point for the whole autumnal look, and with strawberry I used it more of a starting point for the whole sugary sweet kawaii look. Whereas with poppy, if there was some sort of bigger idea that I could derive from it, it would probably just be Remembrance Day. Now it could just be the British in me, but I thought that would be a bit of a downer. So I moved on, and I moved on to Ring. Now Ring was sparking up some real joy for me, and I had a whole flurry of associations with it. You know, ring on the phone, ring donut, ring a ring of roses, ring on the finger, all sorts. But it was ring on the phone that really caught my attention. Now I actually did quite a bit of research for this and mood boarding, and I found out that telephone boxes were first introduced here in the 20s and 30s. And so for my image I was envisioning quite a dynamic layout. There'd be a black graphic line down the middle diagonally, and it'd be a bit of a deviation from the layout I've been doing up until this point, with one side of that line having someone in 20s attire calling from a black phone box, and that would be in black and white, and then the other side of the line it would be in Technicolor, and it would be someone from the 70s calling from a bright orange phone box, obviously in the fashions of the time. And I just thought that would be a really fun contrast, funky, nice bright colours, black and white. I made quite the extensive mood board for it actually. But with the day for strawberry fast approaching and a couple of details left to finish up, I just had to let that one go. Plus I was feeling really burnt out from Slug, and so I don't think I was ready and raring to go as quickly as I needed to get it done. So I set my course on Leaf instead, and that's where I'll leave you hanging for today. At this point in the project I had 3 illustrations under my belt, but it had taken quite some wrangling to get here. I was really happy with the finish on the first few drawings, but at what cost? The burnout was quickly getting to me, and I was only a few days into the project. So tune in for the next video to see if I fared any better with Leaf. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in more, why not hit the subscribe button? And whilst you're at it, you might as well check out my art over on Nosredler Designs on Instagram or at nosredler.com for my portfolio. Links in bio. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.